Ready?
everyone. Welcome to the Reality Therapy Podcast. We have a group of mental health professionals discussing recent tragedies and responses to recent tragedies. And before we start out, there was something that I wanted to read to you. This was sent to me by therapist friend Megan Holder, who I think some of you know. Um, she says, my advice to therapists during our current times would be to become a Charlie Kirk in all professional interactions with peers. In every training and conference, have the confidence, honesty, and bravery to speak and hold the line in a loving way, like Charlie. But also prepare for pushback and cancellation. Have a professional backup plan to address workplace cancellations. Understand that there may be the possibility that violence should come your way. In this case, always be prepared to defend your life if possible. Something like living with the heart and soul of Charlie Kirk, the backbone of Jake Freeman, and the discernment of Jake Wiskerchen. So I thought that was a lovely thing that Megan sent, and I think that should be a good way to kick us off today.
That's pretty high praise. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Don't everybody speak at once.
Why don't you go ahead, Jake?
All right, fine. Okay, so admittedly, I didn't hear you guys' panel on Thursday because that was a really busy day for me. But it's alarming to hear how many people of our profession who allegedly hold our same ethical values and our same ethical precepts can take such a position of hatred. And I've been rolling this around in my head to try to get some coherent, articulable sense of what's going on in these individuals' psyches and hearts. And the only thing I can come up with is that they're just really insecure. And when you're insecure, you're scared. You're scared because you don't know who you are and you're unanchored. And that's unfortunately what this profession has been preaching for like 30 years is deconstruct everything. Nothing is real. Everything is self-made. Nothing is grounded, because if it were, then it's somehow, I don't know, judgmental or oppressive or something like that. So we've infused the whole profession with this postmodern deconstructionism garbage. And let me be quite clear on this. Postmodernism as a thought exercise for somebody in binary thinking is quite good because it dislodges them from their black or white and introduces gray. But you can't live in the gray because you need some direction, you need structure. So when you apply that philosophy to an entire profession or all of society, and then you start saying that ethics don't matter, and or I can just make up my own ethics based on my whim. I can create reality as I see it. I can center myself as God in my own universe. What ends up happening is when somebody comes along who is principled and points to things in print like ethics or laws, it threatens the very structure of what that person's trying to create, which is creation on their own, right? And so you get a fear response, and that fear, if not tolerated well, turns into anger, and anger leads to hate, and hate leads to the dark side. And it sounds tongue in cheek, but I think that's what we're seeing here. We're seeing an outlandish response fueled by hatred, but it's perpetuated by fear. And I think if we just try to get some people anchored in principles that are timeless and not debatable, then we might be able to restore some sanity to this profession. It's revolting to see this go on, and I can't imagine doing business with somebody who gleefully cheers the intentional murder of another human being. What are we doing if not preserving life? I mean, some of these people actually have MDs too that I saw on social media. And like, did you just chuck the Hippocratic Oath right out the window? I mean, I don't understand it. And it's not a conservative versus liberal thing. This is something very Luciferian in my estimation. I mean, this is like very unhinged, godless type of evil presenting itself in our sphere. And unfortunately, like, our profession is supposed to be above that. We're supposed to be ethically moored, and we're just not in some cases. And so that advice about, prepare for, possible backlash and cancellation and job loss, And it's like, man, that's really scary that we would stand on the anchored principles that have guided this profession for, dozens of years, and lose our jobs because of it. It's very, very ironic and paradoxical. I could probably go on and on, but there are 6 other people on the screen, so I want to put a cork in it for now and let you guys go.
Mm.
I think what we're wrestling with, we've read about evil all of our lives, but we've never actually been out in the field and had it run up to us and introduce itself. And that's exactly what we're seeing. And it's very hard to get our arms around it. We want to explain it away. We want to try and explain away evil as some sort of possibly a mental issue that we can deal with. We can't deal with evil other than how we're allowed to by our creator. And that's tough. That's exactly what we're wrestling with right now.
Jake, in response to what you were talking about regarding ethics and what we have been allegedly taught in grad school, I'm just going to lay it at the feet here. I think the ethics principles have slowly but then swiftly were captured by ideology that supports things to affirm. And if you don't affirm it, then I'm the crazy one and you are the righteous one. And I think that, the therapists on TikTok that really are celebrating what happened the other day is a product of this brainwashing that has been allowed to occur over years within academia. The thing that stands out to me, and I'm just going to shut up after this, Charlie Kirk directly defied the college campus way of life by reintroducing dialogue to graduate students or just undergrad students or whoever decided to show up because they have been starving for the dialogue. And this was at the heart of the woke ideology who thought they had it all sewed up at the college and graduate level courses. And Charlie went and destroyed them.
We did so on First Amendment foundational principles, right? It's like I'm about as close to a 1A absolutist as you're going to find, and behind that I'm a 2A absolutist, is about as close as you're going to find. And my friend Kayvon Moezi, who's a comedian, KVON is his stage name, Kayvon. He went on Adam Carolla's show some time ago and made this point. It's like he was going to show up on Kayvon was going to show up on a college campus, and 10 protesters decided that they were going to starve 300 people of a comedy show. So Turning Point reached out and said, hey, look, we'll fix this for you. And they went around and made sure that Kayvon got his stand-up act at every college campus, because they're institutions that take government money and you're not allowed to just suppress speech. And I think that at the heart of this is a speech suppression effort, that we're not supposed to be able to speak truth to people, which is very detrimental to the counseling field altogether. Because if you're unanchored, of course you're going to have psychiatric distress. And if we can't return some structure and some anchoring and some direction to people who are ailing, then we all just suffer together. And that's why I think it's well beyond any sort of political motivation or ideology or belief structure. It's like this is starting to feel spiritual. And if you don't realize that you're under the spell of a nasty spirit that's destroying people by keeping them ill, I think you're part of the problem.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, and even going beyond like a lack of anchor, I think it's actively destabilizing people. So it's like we're actively advised, and like part of our ethics is to facilitate a revolution, both like literally in the outside world, but also in people's minds and hearts, in a way that destabilizes them from reality. So I think like when I when I think about all these mental health professionals and just the ways that our professional bodies have allowed and encouraged this to occur, it really is like quite disturbing because it's going to the point where you're actively facilitating somebody's detachment from reality, which always has consequences. So like we're not only in a bind where we can't criticize or do anything about it based on our like current ethics and standards and things like that. But we're also like having to, not more or less sit by, but there's only so much we can do to prevent the active harm of people who are going to therapists and are having this being done to them.
I
This is
think
what.
for
Oh,
me,
go ahead, Rich.
oh, thanks. I think for me, I feel as a therapist that I have the immense privilege of sitting with people from all walks of life, all different philosophies, all different orientations, and listening and working through the very like light and shadow that exists within all of us. And so at the core of what I am doing so often, I work a lot with families in conflict. Um, what I am always trying to do is facilitate dialogue. I am trying to encourage people who seem so split to come to the table and to remember that we can talk through things, that there is nothing too dangerous to discuss with one another. So when, witnessing this horrific tragedy, this murder of Charlie Kirk in that moment, um, it is so symbolically representative of a sort of systemic illness that trickles all the way down into the therapy room, into family systems. And it's heartbreaking, but more than that, it's so troubling to me that there are therapists and people, within 2 hours, one of the leading therapists that I would call him like the Gen Z therapist was immediately making a video. I mean, Charlie Kirk is freshly dead. His wife is in a room with his body, they're with 2 small children who now no longer have a father. And this therapist used his platform to tell the audience, here's why it's okay you don't feel compassion about this. Here's why it's okay if you're not feeling empathy right now. And I just think when I'm sitting with people in my office and they're at the worst points in their life, I always ask them, okay, who do you want to be now? Like, who are we going to be in this? And so for me as a therapist, watching that therapist say that, I said, is that really who we're going to be right now? Like, are those our principles? Is that the values we're going to lead with as therapists? Reminding a certain contingent of people that actually totally fine. You don't need to feel compassion or empathy for this human being. You're completely fine identifying him only as his political and religious philosophies and killing him off relationally in your mind as a human being. And that's fine and that's normal. And I don't think it's normal and I don't think it's okay. And I'm really disgusted by my profession when I see those kinds of messages put out there. And they're sadly too common.
Yeah, no, it's not normal and it's not okay. That's the mental platform from which they operate. Their mental platform, philosophical platform, does not take into account the value of human life. It simply does not. So that's my latest thought here in the last couple of weeks is the point has been driven home to me that there are 2 separate distinct groups of people in the United States, not just counselors, but 2 separate groups of people. Those of us who believe in the founding principles of this country and Christian and Judeo value system. And then there's others who subscribe to a totally different platform that, again, does not value human life. And so until we accept that it exists, I don't want it to exist. People will say, well, don't foment division. Well, I'm not fomenting anything. I'm recognizing what already exists. And to expect this other group to behave like we do when they were taught something else um, is I guess it's that definition of insanity, isn't it? Expecting something out of, where it's not going to come from.
Let's
Anyway.
get Tony in here real quick.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of grifters out there. I think. I mean, as soon as everything kind of went down, everyone's making content, um, and I think that speaks to just a sociopathic tendency that our society has right now. And I think from the therapist lens, when we're making videos about having, the tension between, not feeling compassion and how it's okay and it's a normal process and all that. This is just a more severe, kind of overt, in your face, obvious example of what has been going on for a long time. This stems back to, they clearly don't value human life. Whether it's, I'm speaking directly to progressive and left. And if it sounds divisive, because I intentionally want to be divisive with that, because I think that is very, very specific and important to make that distinction. This stems back to all kinds of issues: transgender issues, abortion issues, sanctity of marriage, being okay with, non-monogamous relationships, everything that this side pushes devalues the actual human life. They don't value the body they were born in, so they get to change it. They don't value the baby that's being grown inside of them, so they get to murder that baby. And I think that it's just this stuff has been going on for a long time, and so it's led to this point where probably the most egregious version of devaluing the human life is just being exposed. And I think that I wrote a few things down here, and I think for me, the thing that I've seen immediately from different people, therapy-wise, has just been exactly what you guys were saying. What are you doing when you're wrestling with the tension of, his dangerous rhetoric, but he's also a human, and, we don't want anybody to die, but his rhetoric was dangerous. And there's this thing that I'm dealing with right now that I'm just kind of calling conditional compassion, I guess would be kind of the best way that I could describe it, which is the problem that I'm seeing is even the people who are condemning the violence, there's always pre-qualifiers. They always have to use a pre-qualifier. Listen, I don't agree with everything that he says. Listen, I hate everything he stands for, but, there's no room for violence. And I think when you start using pre-qualifiers, right, you are unconsciously reinforcing this idea that dignity depends on alignment or agreement, is what I wrote down. And so it's this conditional compassion. It's this sense that giving unqualified compassion, speaks to the moral decay of our society. I think that this idea that the first thing I have to do after someone was brutally murdered, I don't think anything has been this gruesome from a significant public figure since JFK. I mean, I don't think anything has been this overt and gruesome like this. Maybe I'm missing something there, but I think that when the first thing they have to do is pre-qualify it by distancing themselves from that person's belief, it all of a sudden immediately shows the priority of how they affirm that person's humanity. And to me, that conditional compassion is, it's the issue for me. I don't even care if they condemn the violence. I would honestly rather them just come out and be happy about it, because at least I know. But this this cognitive dissonance that they create, it's obviously gaslighting in a lot of ways, but it's a normalization. I wrote down here that when every statement of violence needs a disclaimer, like a pre-qualifier, it subtly, communicates that agreement is a prerequisite for humanity, and that it starts to erode the baseline of our, morality. And so that's the thing that I think has been really, really wrecking me the most. It's like I was trying to think, like, why wasn't I this distraught when the CEO of that healthcare company got assassinated? And I still can't quite answer that question, but I know with Charlie, I think there's this sense that he was just a husband, a father, and I think the United Healthcare CEO is another good example that I think some of us were probably less sad about it, and I think that speaks to our own sin and our own, like, I know for me personally, I know, like, that was convicting. Like, why am I more upset about Charlie than I am about this CEO of this healthcare company that got assassinated? And it was very convicting because it was like he's also a dad. He's also a human. And it immediately put into check my own kind of morality and how I use conditional compassion. And so I think, anyway, those are just some thoughts I have.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to try to tie together a few of the threads that we've kind of come out with. And one is, I've heard a couple of people use the word evil. Jake used the word Luciferian. I think both Tony and Phillip kind of talked about, like, there's these two camps that seem pretty incompatible. And I think this seems like shockingly horrific to a lot of us. Katie and I have had a lot of conversations. Katie, I think you mentioned it a second ago about how, like, this is not an unintended side effect. Like, this is kind of the point in some ways, in the sense that they want to destabilize people psychologically to lead to this type of thing, to eventually lead to revolution. And from their perspective, we would say that that's a violent act, and they would almost frame it as like a self-defense kind of act. They would say, coming from this like postmodern, post-structuralist view where language creates reality, language can be violence. Because Charlie Kirk said something like there's only two genders, that's erasing that whole category of people. Therefore, that's an act of mass violence. So they would view that as the violence, not. And I'm wondering, kind of, when you look at these two camps, like, it seems an awful lot like there's an incompatibility between the two camps in America.
If I was a professional debater, the first thing I'd want to do is absolutely destroy any platform that you use, any mental platform that you use to come up with your arguments, including language and everything else. I'd do exactly what they've done. Golda Meir, the prime minister or whatever the title was back in the 60s of Israel, said, you cannot argue, you cannot have a discussion with somebody who is intent on killing you. They're operating from a totally different system and platform that are never going to merge.
This is why definitional values matter. This is why words matter. And at the heart of the Marxist, leftist, totalitarian revolution is the unmooring, disassembling, unanchoring of definitional values. I hold in my hand, for the listening audience who isn't watching on YouTube, the DSM-5, not the text revision, just the 5, the purple one. It is thinner than the text revision because they keep adding things and changing things. When our profession doesn't have a common understanding of what words even mean, because they change every 5 to 13 years, we then get unanchored, right? So we end up in debates, and I'll use a very simple one. Is it bipolar disorder or is it manic depressive disorder? Well, the book said, right? Okay, somebody at some point put the APA in charge of determining what mental illness is. And we know it's managed care and it's all tied together to get reimbursed for our treatments and all that stuff. But then we leapfrog into the realm of, like, well, it's not technically mental illness if you commit mass murder. It's like, well, why isn't it technically mental illness? Well, because it didn't get diagnosed. Well, how did they not get diagnosed? Well, they never went into the clinic. It's like, you're going to sit there and tell me that it's not mentally disturbed to go mass murder people, or murder anyone for that matter, like, with malice aforethought, which is the legal definition in most cases, premeditated, murder, taking of a human life, that's not mentally unhinged. You're telling me that that's a well-adjusted person, like who didn't need treatment? Well, it doesn't fall into the statistical category of whatever criteria we slapped on it in the DSM. So therefore, it's not mentally ill. All of a sudden, we're now lost in the weeds of a debate based on semantics, rather than looking practically at the act and whether or not it aligns with nature and humanity. And that's exactly the operation here, right? So on college campuses everywhere, in grad schools, we get told that the definitions of things are not the definitions that we thought they were. It's like a Jedi mind trick. It's like, this isn't the word you thought it meant. Ethics, we have 5 ethical precepts. I talk a lot about this. I've got an entire podcast on it, an episode on it. I think I have 2 on it. Non-maleficence, don't hurt anybody. Beneficence, help somebody. Fidelity, be faithful and honor the principles of the profession and the contract you signed. And then autonomy, which is like just the allowance or the recognition of a human being to operate on his or her own terms without our influence. And then justice, right? Do something good, act on someone's behalf if necessary. Do the right thing. But what happens is these activists who want to flip everything into their favor so they can control others will say, well, it's beneficent for me to affirm your illness so you can go down this path of medicalization, permanently sterilizing yourself. That's beneficent. And if you stand in the way and try therapy first instead of medical intrusion first, then that's harmful. It's maleficent. So they've inverted reality, and they say, well, I'm acting out of justice to help these poor people. But when you act out of one, you're inherently stepping on the other. So if I act out of justice and act on somebody's behalf, then I'm stepping on their autonomy. So I happen to believe that, even though they're all supposed to hang even in balance, I think autonomy is the one that's at highest risk, because out of our sense of beneficence, non-maleficence, justice, and fidelity, we can step on people's autonomy willy-nilly. And I think that's happening all over the place. And I think we're actually getting trained to do that. It's like, don't acknowledge somebody's own capacity to walk forth and heal and do good things. Definitely do it for them. It's insane. Like we've watched an inversion of the basic principles of our entire field, and how dare we stand up to this? I mean, Jake Freeman in the chat actually asked, he says, where is it? Bah. Where did it go? Anyway, guess I lost it. He's too busy complimenting my voice. Yeah, I lost it. Oh, here it is. They get really mad when they simply don't allow them to harm you. What's that all about? It's like, no, you don't get to harm me. And on behalf of my patients, I don't want them to harm themselves any further either. For some reason, they cleared their throat and raised their hand and signed the forms and came into my office seeking help. So I'm going to stop the harm first. But now we're debating what harm even is, because we've been browbeaten and thumped across the skull with professors who abuse their power differential in the classroom to tell us what the new definition is going to be of harm and harm prevention. And it's like, what? Let's pull the lens back and just observe this person who's throwing his life away with drugs and alcohol. I'm not supposed to tell him to stop. Are you kidding me? But, who are you to tell him what's good? Well, I'm the guy he hired.
The day that the medical field, I'll talk about the allopathics, the day that the medical field decided to disregard the original Hippocratic Oath, and now medical school med students are writing their own Hippocratic Oath, seem to dovetail into our way of thinking of what do no harm is. So, this has been started on the medical side, and it's bled into, I hate to use that word, it's just permeated our counseling field, because we have to now be in concert with the disregarding the original Hippocratic Oath and writing our own whatever do no harm is, right? And I do believe that Jake is spot on. Our language is being changed for a reason. We have lost the ability to critically think. And then you have the legacy associations, which I have not heard a word from about this horrific thing that has affected they're not only the professionals who belong to these legacy associations, they don't have compassion, and they haven't written a peep about what just happened and how it is now. Are they recognizing a division in their own association members?
Well, I think this goes back to what Tony was talking about with the qualified compassion issue. It's like people are more interested in being popular and liked than they are in being principled and effective. And I think the organizations are no different because they're just seeking membership and money. So if they piss off a bunch of their members who they know darn well are in the camp of, we hate Charlie Kirk and everything he stands for, which is, oh, by the way, free speech and help. Like what? Then they're going to lose membership. They're going to lose money, and then they can't afford that. So they're just not going to take a stand, is my guess.
That's right.
Yeah,
Right.
100%. You see it all the time too. Like it'll be anything from like okay, so like Gavin Newsom had Charlie Kirk on his podcast. I don't know if any of y'all saw that episode. That was a really good episode. I thought Gavin Newsom did a really good job at sparring with him, and he was super kind and he was compassionate. He even like talked about how his kid really liked him. And like, I thought Gavin did a really good job at putting his stuff aside, not compromising on what he believed, and he didn't try to make Charlie feel bad for it. I look at like Dax Shepard, an armchair expert, and one of the comments I see on his podcast more than anything is how disappointed they are that they didn't push back enough. You know, God forbid he has Jason Aldean on and just, shoots the shit with them and just bullshits with them and just like talks about fun stuff. But no, because, Jason Aldean is a Trump supporter and whatever, the fan base. And so I'm glad that some of these people don't feel that pressure, but too often, people do that. They feel this weird pressure to have to like Jay said too, just like energize, the thing that continues to give them clicks and views and all of that. And I think it's this weird thing going back to compassion. The statement I wrote down is like, if I had to sum everything up, I was like, compassion doesn't ask whether someone deserves it. It reveals whether we are healthy enough to give it, is basically where I land with it. I think if you find yourself relieved
print that, put it on a shirt and sell it.
If you find yourself relieved that, that he died or anyone died, like, again, I go back to like the United Healthcare CEO, like I didn't feel I was like, really like, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe like that's awful. But I didn't feel this visceral thing that I feel. But I think a lot of times what we think is that like, if you're relieved by somebody's death or execution or murder, it's not proof that you're right. I think it is, more proof that violence is actually, started to shape you.
Mhm.
And so again, I think compassion, it doesn't ask, whether or not someone deserves it, which is always the problem, which is now we're into the conditional compassion. Everybody deserves it. That's literally the point of the gospel. I'm a Christian, and I'm unashamedly so. So the whole point of the gospel is that we suck at it. We suck, and I can't get over. I'm really bad at loving the Lord, but I can't get over how much he loves me, is like the whole point. Like we're really, really bad at this. And so the whole point is that none of us deserve compassion, and yet we still are loved by God. And so it's this whole idea that compassion doesn't ask whether someone deserves it. It reveals whether or not you are healthy enough to give it. And I think when you look to, the way that the left or the progressives are reacting to his death, I think it really, 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 truly reveals how unhealthy they all are. Because I just saw a video of just how all the people that you would probably put on the right, how they are reacting to Charlie's death. And what are they doing? Prayer vigils. Churches are having worship nights. They're having prayer nights. They're getting together. Their campuses are hosting, prayer events. I know GCU did a good big one here. Charlie's from Arizona, from right where I'm at. And so all the churches are like getting together. Our church is changing its service on Sunday to not, make any stances or anything, but just to really talk about violence. And so this is how we're responding, right? Is we pray, we come together. How do they respond? They burn the streets, right? They celebrate. And I think that's, that's the issue. So
Can we get Rachel and Katie in here?
Yeah. Tony, I really appreciate what you said with the conditional compassion piece. I definitely think there is a strange asymmetry there, that when I kind of play a little thought experiment of thinking, switch around the identities of all of this situation. If a activist, let's say a trans speaker was up on a stage, was shot publicly from, a religious person, the complete opposite scenario, I have no doubt that you would immediately, just without qualification, you wouldn't say, well, I don't agree that this person identified in this, specific way, or their values, he shouldn't have been executed on the thing. You would just outright, I'm guessing, and I immediately say that is horrible and wrong. And so there is this asymmetry in the profession where people do provide these qualifiers to certain people before they'll acknowledge their humanity. I think that's very real. And Jake, what you were saying about that, there's an interesting intersection, like an inversion of the maleficence and beneficence. It really is both sides believe they're in the morally good, justifiable position. It's kind of like when we see this polarization, you have two sides who believe they are the good guys, and you have each side who believe the other is the bad. Like, that is what we in the mental health field need to contend with. And we do have constructs, we do have frameworks for this. I would diagnose this as a collective sort of borderline personality disorder that we're dealing with. The splitting is so apparent. The valuation, devaluation, when we move into the emotional part of our minds, where we are reacting, we are hurting, we are in pain about something, how quickly we go to us versus them, how quickly we speak in broad overgeneralizations. Like, when I hear people say they murdered Charlie Kirk, I do think an entire 50% of the population did not just execute Charlie Kirk. We all have inner reflection to do, which I think, Tony, you just modeled it so well when you said, where am I actually applying conditional compassion? And why did this killing not bother me as much as this killing? Like, I think all of us could sit with that kind of inner self work in order to de-escalate what's really emotions run absolutely out of control, because borderline personality disorder at its core is really just an emotional dysregulation disorder that kind of leads us to think in such polarities and then act from those polarized ways of thinking. So yeah, when I think about what is our job as mental health professionals, it should be to lead the public in educating more on what's going on right now and bringing the temperature down. Bill Doherty, who's a really great therapist, he wrote the book, The Ethical Lives of Clients. He said that therapists who claim to be neutral are more often than not under the values of the dominant culture. They just kind of absorb them and regurgitate the values of the dominant culture, which I would say here in the West, it leans heavily left. It's hyper individualistic, and it's really emphasizes self-protection, self-compassion. And we're also under there's a researcher, Nick Haslam, he talks about concept creep. It's where psychological terms start to just broaden out way beyond their original meaning. So harm, we now use harm and we think of somebody disagreeing with you as harmful, and we call that harm in the same vein of someone being publicly executed as harm. So it's like, well, Charlie Kirk harmed others. No, Charlie Kirk used words. That the gunman just used a bullet and he's dead now. So that's not the same harm. These are not the same thing.
Rachel, you're advocating for a return to grounded sanity. where things
dare
mean
you?
something,
How dare you?
and we're not allowed to do that. When
Yeah.
again, it's this weird paradox of hyper individualism pinned to the collective, though, right? There's a collective hive mind
Yeah.
that externalizes control to the ideology or the belief system or what I was taught by my professor or my mentor or my supervisor, and it's never about me. So there's a narcissism there too, where it's not about me, but I'm going to center myself in it all the time. Therefore, I eschew accountability personally and blame shift while making sure that I myself am protected. This is what makes it so crazy for everybody to try to anchor themselves. So what do we do as professionals? I heard you say that, like, we're supposed to be bringing things to the public that are, enlightening, and it's like, yeah, some of us, but the rest of us are saying, no, that's not the way to do it. So who wins, right? We have to I think we got to pull the lens back and go, what does common sense say? Well, my common sense or your common sense, right? Like, are you serious? I guess at the end, the marketplace will win out, because the marketplace, the broader distribution of people will figure out what they want to do. And maybe we do have a fracturing. I don't know, but I don't know what the answer is. Do you have an answer to this? Because I mean, I love what you're offering. I'm saying that there's a whole bunch of people out there, and you and I both know them, who would say, you're wrong, I'm wrong, it's this other way. It's like, well, how do you have a debate with somebody like that when they've so convinced themselves that they're right, and they're going to make sure that you're not right? There's no open debate. There's no basic rules of engagement anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh,
Yep,
absolutely.
right.
And I think I'm applying some, like, right, what we're doing is even in what I'm saying is applying some level of like CBT or dialectical thinking here, right? And when we do that, it feels invalidating to a person who's so fused with their ideology, so fused with their thoughts.
Nay, painful,
Yeah,
harmful, right?
yes.
Because you're
And
challenging them,
it's
pushing them into
harm, so I'm
disequilibrium.
harming you now. I have harmed you by addressing the cognition itself, by addressing the thought and the fusion there.
And now you're an unethical therapist. And yep.
Yes. But I think we can rise up to that of, like, don't stay down in the weeds, highlight more at the meta level what is actually going on. Move into, if we're moving into like the dialectical thinking, therapists should be the wise mind of pulling up above it all and noticing and talking about it. But it takes courage. It does now, because you're right. People, you will be labeled. You will be told you're harming people. You will be sanctioned in some way in certain circles. But maybe that's where Charlie Kirk's execution was a moment for me to reorient and say, I am grounded in the principles of excellence, care, and courage. And so I'm not going to lose courage in the face of this. And I'm going to move forward and keep applying the skills and the principles that I know as a therapist, even in the face of my own profession, acting like, engaging and splitting themselves. Yeah.
Let's
Sorry,
get
I'll shut up
Katie in
now.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Rachel and Jake, I think you're bringing up something really important with respect to this fusion of group identity. So, and this is something that I think is really important, and I think it's kind of pushed under the rug when we talk about mental illness, is that individual psychopathology is generally less important than group psychology, and specifically collective identity for things like terrorism. I'm not like making any claims that this is or isn't terrorism, because I really don't have that information yet, but I think it relates more broadly to radicalism and just this kind of destabilizing pattern. And so what usually happens, and we see this time and time again throughout the 20th century, is that people lose their understanding of themselves and their connection to reality and get like almost entirely fused in this like movement and so the movement almost takes them along like through history, and they like just get swept up on the wheel. And so like I think it's really important to understand that when our professional organizations and when our fellow clinicians are raising critical consciousness and actively facilitating like a fusion with collective identity, that they're doing something extremely dangerous when they're doing that. And just with respect to this conversation about how, like solutions and how to solve things and whether the free market is enough. I mean, I think what Phillip and Kathleen are doing is incredibly important. I think we need counter organizations such as what they're doing, so that we can have some kind of organization and alternatives for people to go to. I do think objective reality always going to win in the end. There's only so much that you can do to create an artificial environment before it eventually collapses. So, if you sort of just kind of put your trust in what that means, and stand in principles and courage and understand that, regardless of how things might go in the profession, that there is an objective reality and that we can do good and maintain the profession regardless. I think that's really important.
I think you're pointing to something that is again at the heart of this, which is faith. People who know themselves well, capital S self, right? If you know yourself well, and you don't have to be bombastic or convince other people of your position, then you can just make peace with the unknown and embrace mystery. But if you don't, there's a compulsion to get others to align, right? And sometimes that compulsion, because the individuals are so insecure, turns into violence. And sometimes that violence is what we would traditionally think of violence, like weapons. And sometimes the violence is, I'm going to file a complaint against you with your licensing board because I don't like the way you speak, right? And it turns into that type of excommunication from the profession because the individual filing the complaint against the person with whom they disagree wants you exterminated from the profession because they themselves don't know how to tolerate not them, right? Something that's not of their creation, not in their control. So on this continuum, I see people of faith, and it doesn't have to be a spiritual faith. It's just faith in the marketplace, faith in reality, faith in objectivity, right? It's like, oh, I just trust that that's going to shake out the way it's going to shake out, which begets a non-attachment, a real, true non-attachment where you can offer things with an open hand and go, hey, take it or leave it. This is just my idea. I'm not attached to it. And on the other end of the continuum, you've got power and control freaks who insist that their way be the way for all. And that's a tension that's occurring here too.
I think we have seen, especially during COVID, to continue, Jake, what you just said, the militant cult canceling of voices who don't share that ideology, which leads into that hive mind type of modality, I guess, if you will. So if you're not afraid of being canceled, then maybe this is time. This is go time for you.
You all have a level of eloquence that I can only dream about, and you very, very well laid out what the problem is. You know what the problem is. We know what the problem is. Where do we go from here? How do you fix
I have a
this?
thought. I have a thought on that answer. This may not be a popular answer, and if any of you here are not a part of this, it's just I just believe it's truth. So I think the only answer to this is Christ. I think because I think immediately, I think what it speaks to is spiritual poverty, in our society. And, regardless of the religion, if you go back to, I heard a guy say one, I think it was Andrew Klavan from Daily Wire. I could be wrong, so don't quote me on that. It's on video, so I'm already quoted. But I think it was Andrew Klavan. He made a comment that our society has shifted back to, with the canceling and with the woke culture. That's just, they want to just silence everybody, cancel everybody for not being perfect in their eyes, the way that they see it. What he said was, our culture is returning back to a Puritan culture without God. So it's a Puritan culture without a God. And I think that is very sobering to think about. But I think it speaks to the spiritual poverty of our society, which is what leads to conditional compassion, and which is what leads to, all those pre-qualifiers I think that we have. And I think the answer, unfortunately, for some people who don't believe this, I just think it's truth. I think that if you think you can legislate, if you think you can do anything from a human perspective that will solve darkness, and that nothing will solve darkness other than Christ. And I because he is the light. And so we are living in our own little universes here on earth where we are the Lord of our own life. We are the Lord of our own country. We are the Lord of this whole world, and we think we can solve the problem, and you can't legislate it. It is only a coming back to the actual light, and that light is Jesus. And so I say this because I want to speak to be a little critical of the right side too. I'm a libertarian, so I hate them all. I think everybody is stupid. So
Lowercase or uppercase?
What's that?
I said lowercase L or uppercase L.
I don't know. I don't even know even if I'm a libertarian. I just know I hate them all. So I'll be a little critical of the right here too. I this immediate sense that we've got to go back and if we had more guns, or if this, and again, it's the same thing, but on the other side, we immediately try to just politicize it. We try to come up with our own solutions. Listen, I don't care what you do. You can have as many guns as you want. You can have as little guns as the other side wants. Darkness will prevail without Jesus Christ. And that is just the reality. And I think part of the problem is that spiritual poverty. I had a spiritual mentor that I've kind of had over the years just from watching afar, is this guy named Craig Rochelle. He's super like a leadership guy from Oklahoma City.
Dangerous Prayers, right? He wrote Dangerous
maybe.
Prayers?
Yeah, I don't know. I know his church invented the Bible app, so it's that. So if you have it, and then you're welcome from them, I guess. But he said that like the distance between a spiritual maturity is the distance between someone's convictions and their like actions. So like that like distance, right? So however long it takes you to kind of respond, speaks a lot to your spiritual maturity. Well, I tell clients regularly that, the same thing, but emotional maturity. The emotional maturity, I would say, goes to more of like a Viktor Frankl kind of sentiment, which is, I would say, the distance between, or the space between your initial reactivity, which is a human response, right? It's okay to get immediately rageful or whatever, but the distance between your reactivity and your ability to regulate speaks to your emotional maturity. And so even to the people that immediately felt a slight sense of relief, right? I think that speaks to, that is a normal human, that is a reactive thing that is normal in humans, but it speaks to the emotional maturity that how quickly can you go, whoa, that's evil, that's wrong. How dare I go there immediately and then regulate myself and get back to what is normal, which is feeling compassion for somebody. Because I think having compassion is an integrated response, which is what is normal for people. So I think it speaks to the spiritual poverty. And I think for me, and I put something on Instagram and Twitter, and I got some messages on Instagram. People were like, on the right, they were like, how could what I put on there was, I hope the murderer meets Jesus, repents of his sins, evicts the evil from his heart, and gets to spend eternity with Jesus. That's what I feel. I genuinely feel that. I hope he does. And I got messages like, how could you say that? And I was like, because I want everybody to spend eternity with Jesus. That's what I want. I don't want this guy to just die. I don't want him. It's this empty, hollow form of justice when we don't bring the real light to the darkness. And I think, unfortunately, that's what I feel like the answer is. Phillip, to your questions, like where do we go from here? I think until people come to the real light, I think we will always find ourselves in this space. And so, yeah.
I want to build off of what Tony is saying there. First of all, I completely agree with you that Jesus is the answer. I think that's an astute point. But also, I want to be careful of what you might call like an anti-compassion downward spiral. So there's people on the left who say Charlie Kirk did or said hateful things, therefore he does not deserve compassion. And then, we over here look and say, oh, these leftists who are responding that way, they're responding that way because they're evil, therefore they don't deserve compassion, right?
Mhm.
And it's kind of like a never-ending spiral of less and less compassion. So as a group of mental health professionals, and we talked about this at the panel on Thursday, and we got kind of mixed responses, got an interesting conversation out of this. Let's say a leftist comes into your office and is just beaming, smile on their face, saying, "I'm so glad that white man, Charlie Kirk, died." How do you handle that kind of a client?
Well, the first thing I'd ask is what brings you in today?
Could you repeat
'Cause I
that
don't-
question, Ryan? Sorry.
Yeah, I
Jake.
mean, as a therapist, somebody like a left-wing client comes into your office and says, "I'm just beaming with happiness. I'm so glad that white man, Charlie Kirk, died."
Okay.
That's not glib. I would ask, what brings you in today? Because it's not that. You made the appointment before that happened. You know what I mean? If they come in next week and they're like, why are you in my office ostensibly to treat a mental illness, and you're leading with joy? That doesn't compute. So somehow or another that would come into the session, and it would be in the context of whatever they're doing there. And then I would evaluate whether or not that's even relevant, because people have opinions about lots of things that may not be clinically relevant. So what I try to remind people to do is, before we get all emotionally wrapped up in somebody's presentation or their speech, is I say, what's the problem? Okay. And it's not always the symptom. Sometimes it's the symptom and the problem are the same, but usually not. So they come in and they say, I've got blah wrong with me. I go, all right, well, what do you want to do about that? And they go, blah. Or it's usually like, solve the thing wrong with me. That becomes the goal. And we maybe form some objectives collaboratively. And then I move to interventions. I don't start throwing interventions when I see a problem. We did this during COVID. I've said this before in different settings, so maybe you've heard this. But, in COVID, we had a problem. It was new virus. Humans can't deal with it real well. And then we jumped straight to interventions. And nobody bothered to ask what the goal was. So we can't do that in the clinical setting. We got to be mindful of what the goal is, and it should be time limited, hopefully, in some quantifiable way, and sometimes not, because it's often subjective. But there's got to be a goal. And so if they say something that I find displeasing about cheering on a celebrity death, or some racist viewpoint, some totalitarian ideology, some other thing that I find just personally distasteful, it doesn't matter. I'm not here for me. I'm here for them. And I'm going to use what they say and try to compare what is coming out of their mouth with what they stated their goal is, and say, does this matter? And is this congruent? And I will openly express my biases when appropriate. And one of my biases is I want authenticity and congruence, because I find that is the most peaceful path, and that is rooted in lots and lots and lots of literature. If you're saying one thing and doing another, you're probably going to have psychiatric distress. If you're in my office, you got psychiatric distress. So I'm going to try to get this individual to be harmonized with whatever they choose. And that'll involve asking questions like, who are you? What do you want to be when you grow up? Who are you at your core? Right? And that has nothing to do with the outward presentation. So, one thing that Christian Conti taught me to do, take a drink for the people playing Christian Conti drinking game, is see through the outward behavioral presentation of an individual into the soul of the person on the inside. Work from there. Right. And so I don't know that I'd even entertain that. I would probably just, okay, is that relevant to what we're working on? I'm not going to let that flap me. It doesn't really matter. Now, if they're there for anger issues and they're cheering on the death of somebody, I go, I think we need to talk about why you're so gleeful about death. And maybe this has something to do with your anger. And anger is always secondary to something more vulnerable. So what are you really scared of? Or what are you embarrassed by? Or what are you sad about? What are we not attending to that maybe get you more closely aligned with the path to harmony, so that you're not in psychiatric distress, so you can leave my office and never come back?
Jake, I think it was you that actually taught me being very good about definitions and like the meaning of words. Therapy means to heal.
Yeah, it was just like 30 minutes ago I said that.
Yeah. So when you're talking about Tony, when you mentioned, and Ryan, having Jesus as the answer, I think Jesus's core teaching, right, is to love your enemies. And I think in therapy, in the healing place, it should just be assumed that you're going to have people come through the door who feel so polar opposite of you, who we would think in that splitting way, enemy. And your call then as a healer is to love. And then we even, embedded in the, Christian teachings, the definition of love as to be patient, to be kind. In Corinthians, right? It's to not envy, to not boast, to not be proud. It doesn't dishonor others. It's not self-seeking, and it's not easily angered, and it keeps no record of wrongs. So I think that even by that definition, like if you're centering Jesus as the framework of like, this is what we all need more of, we need these principles, we need to apply them, that's sort of how you do it. So I like everything you just said there, Jake. And so for me, I would, first of all, I work all the time with people who we don't have inner values alignment, but that's not a problem, so long as I am leading with those core principles at the forefront.
Well, let me throw it on the table, though. These people that we're talking about that are taking great joy in another person's murder don't belong to the same circle of people that you normally see. Those people are, once they read your website, they're not coming to see you. They're going to find a like-minded therapist who's going to agree with them.
Possibly, but I don't know that many people actually read ahead, because I teach this to everybody, all my students, my interns, to say, ask them how they found you, and say you, not us, not Zephyr Wellness. Say, how did you find me? Gosh, like probably 7 out of 10 times they're just like, you're on my insurance panel
Someone
list.
referred me. They recommended you, and
I
they
did a
don't even
Google
check.
search, right?
I think you also have to realize that radical ideologies are probably going to be overrepresented in the type of people who come to therapy.
Yeah, probably. I don't know.
Yes, I don't know. That hasn't been my experience, actually. I think radical has remained radical. I would say the vast majority of people I work with are not, they're not in such a state of radical. They are dealing with very normal, falling within the bell curve human problems of trying to figure things out in their lives and their relationships, their core yearnings. So I actually don't tend to have much of a problem. And I'm not even afraid of, I don't have that fear, actually, Phillip, that, anyone who looks at my stuff or my work, when they're listening and we're working relationally together, that we can't find something, that we can't find some sort of alliance and congruence with each other. And yeah, there's occasions when we can't. But more often than not, when I'm working on that individual person to person level, it's actually quite heartening. I feel so much faith restored in humanity when I'm working with individuals.
That's my point.
People project whatever
possible.
they want anyway, too.
They're not as radical as we think they might be. They
That's a good
want
point,
to hear from you. They want to be with you. They don't have a problem with you looking into their soul or help them think through what they need to be thinking through, because they know that they can have a dialogue with you. I do think that I've got a lot of different people in my portfolio, and it's been very, very good.
Mhm.
Because
Okay.
the spirit is the spirit. And I think as humans, there's still that spiritual level in people who are trying to figure things out. And they know they need to hear from you or be with you to capture or recapture or whatever, work things out, whatever.
Mhm.
I think it is more representative on the woke agenda versus people.
Human
Because
beings
I don't
are
think
still
they're buying
suffering.
it either.
No,
I'm
they're just-
curious. This is kind of a case that I've been making for a while now, is that there's a connection between mental illness and radical ideology. And I'm wondering if y'all see that, because my point is, if someone's like very disturbed internally, it's easy to take that discontent with self and project it as a discontent with society. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Look, if you're insecure, You don't know who you are. You're going to grab onto the loudest, most shiny thing in your presence. And if that thing happens to be toxic, well, it's going to make you sick. And that's happening from elementary school through, people in their second half of life, as Rachel likes to refer to the women that she works with. And I love that phrasing, by the way. If you don't know who you are, you're going to grab whatever's convenient and sexy. And then, unfortunately, I see this in middle school a lot, in high school, where the children don't know who they are, and they grab onto somebody who's shiny and loud, but that person doesn't know who he is either. And then that person just mirroring whatever projection they think they need to be for the audience, and then round and round it goes, and we got a bunch of children who are operating in this fun house, a house of mirrors type thing, where they're all projecting onto each other, and no one knows who they are. And out of that, somehow, like, certain people get elevated, and usually they're the loudest, or they're the most coercive, but they don't know why. They're all insecure, right? If that doesn't, some of this is just normal adolescence and growth and development in middle school, but like, if that doesn't stop and it goes into adulthood, you got some really deep, serious psychopathology. And I'll tell you, my experience tells me that largely the people who stay unanchored through adolescence into adulthood are the ones who were raised in homes that had no anchoring. There is trauma, there's abuse, neglect, violence, inconsistencies, spoiling. Spoiling's a big one we often overlook. On the outside, we have this appearance of like perfection in the family, the nuclear unit, but on the inside, no one's talking to each other, right? They're all glued to their devices, or dad and mom work way too much, but they got the boat, they got the RV, they go on lots of trips. It's like, yeah, but behind the walls of the house, no one, they don't even know who each other is, right? And so, of course, they're going to pick up the societal introduction to malevolence, because it's a control issue. It's like something I can grab onto, and then it becomes me. And if I can't divorce who I am from what I think, we're going to land in Therapyville, and Therapyville is the worst town on the planet, or whatever Patrick says. Therapyland's the worst theme park in America.
I just realized I said maleficence, not malevolence earlier when you said malevolence again. I'm like,
They're the same. No, non-maleficence is the
Maleficent.
ethic.
I'm thinking of the
Malevolence
witch.
is the verb.
No, it's-
Yeah,
So I
Maleficent
feel
is that lady with the horns in her head.
Yeah, I thought
I
that I was
feel
thinking of, oh my gosh.
I feel like I've noticed that a lot, like back to the question about the clients coming in. I think that I don't encounter a whole lot, because I think like I have probably the majority of my caseload don't align fully with me. And I think, um, to Jake's point, I think it's kind of just like people don't really check. I think that someone comes, they get referred by a friend or a neighborhood group on Facebook, and they just hear you're good, and they come and whatever. But the thing that I've encountered more than anything, has been within the therapist community, kind of dealing with having these issues versus the actual clients. But because I think, Jake, what you said about how you would handle the session, I think is perfect. I think it's great. Yeah, my biggest thing is just curiosity. I think that's from a couple's standpoint, that's like Gottman's like antidote for everything, which is perfect. Is the moment curiosity is gone is the moment you have your mind made up, and so just being curious as to why they believe that, and then you can use gentle confrontation to kind of shift them back to sanity. But I've noticed in the therapist world, it's this weird thing that like even within my own practice. So I co-own a practice with we have 16 people on our team right now. And so me and my business partner, 50-50 owners. And just in June, I just sat her down and just told her that I think we should dissolve the company and go our separate ways and start our own practices. And the short end of it is we just personality wise, we don't, it's just, two brake pedals kind of a thing. But a lot of it is just value systems. When we first met, they were more progressive and liberal, but they were still Christians, and there's still like a shared value system, and it worked. But they've really deconstructed to a point that not only do they not believe, but they think the whole system is harmful, and that whole kind of segment of thing. And so it's led to like this team being divided where it's like half of us are like Christians and like very values driven, and the other half are, you know, telling clients that they should get hormones. And so it's been this real weird tension for me. And so I felt like I couldn't profit off of it anymore, and I needed to kind of get away from it. At the height of the business, I mean, we're generating $2 million a year, 1,500 appointments a month, like doing really, really well. And I just felt like conviction-wise, I needed to step away. Point being is we kind of had our Jerry Maguire moment, right? Where we're like, who's coming with me, right? And when we split, and it's been interesting to see how people make their decisions, what therapists to go with. And I got this sentiment from two of people on my team. They told me in their own way, in their own words, that when it comes to faith and values, I'm the comfortable choice, I'm the safe choice, and that they align with my faith and values in terms of like how we treat transgender clients, and that we believe there's 2 genders and 23 mental illnesses, and there's, you know, only, you know, we don't, you know, do gender transitions and all that. They said they agree and they align with me, but they're going with my business partner because they want more diversity. They want different, and I'm noticing that like the sentiment that I'm getting is that I'm going to be too Christian. And so that's an interesting thing to wrap your head around, that I'm going to be too values based.
Yep.
And I'm going, this is where our therapy field is at. This is where, and these two people would call themselves Christians, that our values have degraded to a point, right? That, I have too many values. It's a weird thing to wrap your head around. It makes me question being in this field. Let me put it that way. I actually, before this, I just was like, maybe I should do something else. You know what I mean? Like it's a weird,
Tony,
it's a weird thing.
I hear you. I say frequently that when I joined up with Walk the Talk America in 2019, I refer to it as coming out of the closet as a gun-owning therapist. And I lost professional colleagues who I thought I was friends with because of that decision. Now, it wasn't the only decision that happened with. There were many others along the way, and there have been since. But that principled, anchored stance pushes people away. Why? Because it flies straight in the face of postmodernism. You cannot 100%. Deconstruct when something is trying to construct. It's not possible. They're fundamentally opposed. So Agreed. If you're standing on principle, if you're standing on something certain like truth, it can't be taken down. And you know, Maj Toure has a series of shirts. He's got Black Guns Matter, and one of them that I wear a lot is freedom, and then there's a bar and it says everything. So freedom over everything. Well, Kevin Dixie is another friend who, in the firearms community, he created a shirt that says purpose over popularity. And I can't help but think that in the pursuit of popularity, and look, everybody's Psychology Today profile page, until Psychology Today got wise and they started limiting the boxes you could check, they checked every box. It's like cast the net as wide as possible, be a jack of all trades, take them all in. We're all in competition, right? There's not enough hurt to go around. It's insane. So in the pursuit of popularity and being liked by everyone, we've just abandoned everything that actually matters, which makes you completely ineffective as a therapist. And I know this because so many people come through our clinic and they say things to every clinician, not just me, every clinician. They're like, man, I've learned more from you in 3 sessions than I did in 3 years at my other place. It's like, why is that? That's
because you give
terrible.
them purpose. Because the whole point where you go is you give them purpose. It's what is your purpose and meaning in life, and that's what your therapeutic approach. I mean, I've interacted with you enough to know that your whole focus is more on just when you wake up and put your feet on the ground in the morning. Why? And that's what people want. Yeah.
So, go ahead.
I was just thinking about this, and you know, that sounds so hard, Tony. Like the wrestling with all of that, and with your colleague, and I can't help but also think that from because I hear this so often, I think there's that tension between, is this we leave the 99 and go after the one moment if you're a Christian therapist, like that is Is that colleague feeling more called to, I'm supposed to go to the one, this is what we should be paying more attention to, and they can see it through that. I just think about that a lot when I hear the sort of inner warring that's happening within Christian circles. There's that same sort of like sparring and not being sure, and then it feels like it has to split. It feels like we're dividing up and dividing up and dividing up further. And I feel sad about it, because I think that's more reflective of the increasing amount of polarization that just keeps going all the way down through. And I work with families all the time, so there will be these horrific divides that happen within, an adult child no longer speaking to their parent, grandkids no longer seeing grandparents. And they are dividing down the line on these very topics, these very different ways of seeing their own. And they share the faith too. They're all Christian, or they profess to be Christian, but they're not speaking to each other anymore. And so, I mean, my heart just goes out to you, because this is so real and it's happening on like every single level.
So
The body of Christian values developed by our Creator has become a pick and choose buffet.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of shift gears as we kind of come to a close. And
Already? Oh,
I mean, I figured this last topic would last us at least 15 minutes. So
I prepared for 4 hours, so I don't know what everybody else is doing the rest of the day.
we can go as long as y'all want.
We can go as
Sorry,
long as we want. I just have to pee.
Noise. My kids are making
Yeah.
so much noise.
I was planning on an hour and a half, but we can do whatever y'all want. No, Thursday morning we had a prayer vigil at my church, and it was a sad time. A lot of not very many dry eyes in the building. There's probably 150 people that showed up for the prayer vigil. Two of my pastors were crying. It was an intense time. I'm on the safety team at my church, and I was extra vigilant and a little, almost not quite jumpy, but like every time the door opened, I was looking, because Charlie Kirk got shot because he says controversial things. My pastors also say controversial things like Jesus is the only way to God, And I'm thinking, like, am I going to have to jump up and take some kind of action? Is that going to happen here? All of us here on this panel say controversial things. I'm wondering, did the Charlie Kirk thing make you think differently about yourself, what you're willing to say, how you interact with the world? Does it make you feel less safe? Like, how are y'all responding in that sense?
I want to hear Katie first.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, I felt a renewed sense of courage from Charlie's assassination, because he lived his entire life basically with that courage. And I mean, sometimes there will be reactions and consequences to it, and you can't let that deter you. So for me, like, it just renewed my sense of wanting to keep speaking up and making sure that I didn't let fear and like those kinds of negative emotions, despair, kind of keep me from moving forward. So for me, I think try to find the good in what happened, and that's something for me.
I'm right there with you, Katie. I'm not going to stop talking. I'm not going to stop helping other professionals to come together and love each other, because we have a big job to do. More than we ever realized. It's right at my feet. And I take the position of, like, nothing's going to stop me because I have free speech on my side, but I'm also really passionate about helping professionals who need a safe place. I'm having to say that stupid word, to be just comforted by our job, which is to help people think through and help them critically think about how they want to do their profession, who they want to see, and just stay vigilant. We got into this business for a reason, and it's not for ideology. It's to do the right thing with love and respect, on principled values and thought, and that's not going to stop me, and it shouldn't stop anybody else. And I'm not afraid. I'm just not.
And I'll just add quickly that I have a lot of regrets for not having the courage during my grad school experience. I didn't really know what was going on, and I made the calculation basically to just keep my head down and try to get through it. And when I look back on that time, especially now that I have more knowledge and, I'm more grounded in values, that I really do have significant regrets for not speaking up at that time. So I think it's just a good opportunity to kind of reflect on what Charlie represented and the values that he embodied every single day.
Yeah, I go back to what I said earlier, what Craig Groeschel said about your spiritual maturity being the distance between your convictions and your actions. And um, to Katie's point, I think that's been a really, really strong conviction of mine lately. And honestly, just a very convicting, sobering moment of how long I have felt convicted to speak up more, be more kind of bold with my purpose, and I haven't, because I didn't want to offend people. We had a lot of people on our team who not only are not religious, but almost all of them come from religious systems and they're deconstructed or whatever, and they're just antagonistic toward it. And so if I'm a part of it, then I'm part of the problem, and so I don't want to offend them. And the fact that it's taken me this long to do this is actually kind of like disheartening and embarrassing for me, that it's taken me this long to kind of step out and do this. It makes me check my own spiritual maturity and get that back in line. But the thing that makes me more proud about what Charlie has done is what I desire the most, more than anything, is what happens is, while everybody on the one side who's like celebrating his death is really, really, he was this, his rhetoric was that, this was good. The people on the side who are actually grieving him, if you look at Twitter, if you look at the news, if you look at anything, what is the thing people are talking about the most about Charlie? And it's how much he loved Jesus and how much he loved his family. Most of the people who are really sad that he's dead is not really sad about the political or cultural impact that he's not going to have moving forward. They're really just grieving the fact that this godly man who loved his wife and kids. And I go, that is a legacy, and that is the legacy that I want. And that is my purpose. And that makes me feel more bold than ever to kind of go, this is the legacy I want. And I'm not going to compromise my convictions anymore to make sure that if I die, when I die, that if I were to die, that this is what people will remember me for. And I could go sell real estate tomorrow. I don't really care. I care more about that legacy. And that's what Charlie inspired in me.
Tony, to your spiritual awakening point, which I'm totally on board with, I know a guy who had a 3-year ministry, was railroaded to his death, the death was cheered on by a group of people, and it was mourned by another group of people, and look what happened after that. I know another fellow who had a 14-year ministry, was brought to his death, unjust death, is being mourned by a large group of people and jeered joyously by another group of people. I'm just talking patterns here. I'm not saying anything other than there's a pattern here that we can observe and probably guesstimate what's going to happen. I think that spiritual awakening that you're talking about is in progress right now. And I've been thinking about this for the last couple of nights and how to phrase it best, but I'm not glad Charlie died. But it's almost as if he had to die to initiate the spiritual awakening that's coming, much like Jesus had to die for a number of reasons. And
Yeah, I
I'll
agree
leave it
with
at
you.
that.
I'll caveat what you said there. I don't think he had to die. I know what you mean. What I would say is what my pastor has said before, which is that God doesn't operate in a way that like someone has to die so we learn a lesson, but God won't waste any pain. And so so exactly to your point is, I think this is going to be pain that is completely redeemed and restored and not wasted for
Right.
to make happen what you're talking about. I agree.
Thank you for that.
Go ahead,
I'm gonna-
Rachel.
Okay. I think when I think about my role as a clinician, I think a lot about the importance of character, that I think people who really want help and really want healing respond to character more than they respond to anything else. So and I think about I listened to Charlie's wife's speech, and when the parts that just sear to my soul are where she says he was the best father and the best husband, and the way he loved and how he asked, how can I serve you, how can I be better with you, that spoke to that character there piece. And do I agree with every quote I've seen? I'm not a Charlie Kirk aficionado. I don't know everything he's ever said. I don't know, there you can plaster up quotes and things and I'll think, oh, I don't agree with that. And it's also given me an opportunity to clarify, because some of my own patients and people who follow me have asked, do you agree with this statement? Do you think this about, this group of people or whatever? And we've been able to have some dialogue, because I think they trust in the nature of my character to ask me to clarify on issues, and I'm able to do that. And so what this moment, this cultural moment, is really reminding me is to root down in principles of character. And for me, it's really excellence, courage, and care. Always reorienting to that as a clinician. Is what I'm doing to the best of my ability? Is it promoting excellence? Is it promoting care? And am I being courageous in that effort? So that's what this is all kind of bringing up for me this last week.
I'm going to try not to ramble. Tony basically said what I would have said. But I have been character assassinated by peer colleagues, and it's not fun. To my knowledge, nobody's tried to cancel me. I've had frivolous complaints filed against me that were unsubstantiated. I've been the target of spiritual warfare. I've succumbed. I'm not proud of it. I'm getting better. And I, like Tony, like many of us, I think, are a little bit embarrassed at not taking bolder action sooner. But we only do what we can with the information we have at the time we have it, and then we move forward. And what's interesting to me is that as I continue to dig in, and it's really been highlighted in the last 2 years specifically, but I don't know, 2 to 3 years, I'd say. As I start to really dig into scripture, because I never really dug into scripture. I was never a chapter and verse guy, but I kind of want to become one, because I'm a chapter and verse guy when it comes to law and ethics. And I think I need to become a chapter and verse guy when it comes to the Bible. But as I continue digging in, I realize that all of the truths that guide our profession can be found in biblical scripture. It's really interesting. Like all the answers are in there, and all the bumper sticker slogans that you hear from pastors, they're true. Like all your answers are in the Bible. They just don't look the way that we think that they should, because we're looking at it through human worldly eyes. And I'm finding that the more bold I become about saying things like all the answers are through Christ. Yeah, it's unconventional, it's unorthodox, but so am I, and so have I been for many years. And I don't mind being iconoclastic. I find myself getting more comfortable with it, but I'm also finding more people drawn to it from a very diverse range of demographics. And I don't beat people about the head and shoulders with my faith, because it's my faith. I like to invite people to explore it as they see fit, because I know we all walk our own path at our own pace. I'm not going to crowbar anybody into thinking what I want to think. I don't want to make a bunch of little mini Jakes running around. That's not right, professionally or clinically. So what I have found is an increasing sense of peace. And I also seem to have lost the ability to discern when I'm saying something controversial, except when I see it in people's eyes when they light up or they take a breath. I go, "Ooh, apparently that was shocking," or whatever. But to me, it's not. To me, it's just I'm speaking truth, and truth binds, and it penetrates, and it resonates, and you can't escape it. So whether it's in a clinical setting with a couple who's fighting, or whether it's on the baseball field with my kids who are running around, amok, and I have to like corral them, and I say something true, like, it's rude and disgusting to spray that water bottle in your teammate's face. Don't do that. It's like, not many other coaches say that. They just say, hey, knock it off or settle in or, refocus or something. But actually, I've started calling things out. And the more I've done this, the more peace I've found and the less fear that I have. So I don't want to die either. I want to keep living. I want to keep participating. I don't want threats to befall my family. I don't want to deal with lawsuits or board complaints or any of that stuff. That's not enjoyable. And simultaneously, I'm not afraid of it. I'm also not going to be purposely provoking people by pissing them off. I'm just going to continue saying things that I think are true and be non-attached to it because I'm open to being wrong. And I find that it's got a gravitational pull to people who also are seeking confidence and truth and direction and sustenance. So I'm going to keep doing that. And I'm not really worried about it. I really am not, because if it truly is my end to be taken out by some terrorist or some, wacko sniper because I've said the wrong thing, God's in control and I don't have to worry about it. And my family knows that also. And they will be profoundly sad, and sadness passes. It's not going to affect anybody at their core. I think what's important is that we continue casting a message of hope and love and peace and tranquility and offering to guide people down that journey. Because I, like Tony, have also considered giving it all up and going and driving forklift at Home Depot with my headphones in my ears because I don't need this shit anymore. But I'm called to it. So what am I going to do? Like, reject the calling? That seems like an offense to God, and I don't really feel like doing that either.
So, I'm looking for like closing thoughts as you reflect on all the stuff we've talked about today and just kind of this whole situation and the recent tragedies. What are some closing thoughts y'all have? Or not?
Channel my inner Bill and Ted and say, be excellent to each other.
I'm going to double down on my collective diagnosis, which is we are in a real borderline personality disorder cultural moment. There is a hypervigilance to perceived rejection, abandonment. There is the splitting. There is the us versus them. There is the complete lack of emotional regulation. There's the impulsivity, the homicidality, the suicidality, like all of it. It's kind of like we are in a mass moment of that. And so applying principles, if we're going to speak just rigorously as like clinicians and use the tools at our disposal, grounded in love, grounded in our principles and our values, is like we do need to promote more of one of the most efficacious treatments for borderline personality disorder is dialectical behavioral therapy. So I encourage people to think more dialectically, to apply those principles, to go study up on it, for clinicians to study up on it, and maybe to use that. So mine's a little bit more of a practical reflection overall. Yeah.
I think for me are two things, and that's figure out what you're afraid of. But the secondary thing is there's a quote that was by Dr. Sean Stevenson that I just clung to back in some days of darkness for me personally and professionally. And it goes something like this: trust yourself, because until you do, you will continue to play small.
It's a good quote.
For me, just in reflecting on this whole conversation, I mean, I have to end by just being frank that like we do have really serious problems that need to be addressed in our field. I'm heartened to see that like we're growing, we're having more and more people feeling less afraid to speak out. We're starting to organize, and starting to make some changes, which is really important. But I mean, there are countless people who are being harmed by this ideology and this culture that's allowed to fester, and these practices that are allowed to occur underneath our standards and ethics and all of these things. So I really want to encourage everyone who's doing this work to keep at it. If you're not getting through to people, just, listen to what's maybe not working. keep trying and, don't get disheartened, because I think that we're getting there. I think we're like kind of approaching this critical mass where like things start to happen a lot faster. And I'm really looking forward to seeing, everything that we can accomplish.
I'm going to close by saying that the foundational purpose of our field was to help people seek liberty, individual liberty from their family systems, their origin or environments, everything. And liberty is not coercive. It's invitational. So I think if my exhortation to the listening audience is, if you encounter somebody who is coercive or manipulative or otherwise doing a sleight of hand, misrepresenting, inconsistent, then I think our job is to push back and say that doesn't sound like you're inviting me. It sounds like you're telling me. Some people actually ask to be told. And then we have to check ourselves as therapists to make sure that what we're telling them is educational and not just instructive, like we're telling them how to live their life out of our own worldview. So I think if we keep that in mind, that the anchoring point of this profession is to seek individual liberty for the purpose of joy, then I think it leaves no room for ideologically motivated interventions. And we just need to be on guard for that. And if we can all continue sharpening each other, then probably we'll find some accountability.
Yeah, I'd say I'm looking here. Charlie tweeted in 2013 on November 17th. He said, "Always forgive your enemies. Nothing annoys them so much." Um, um, which is kind of funny. Another way I've heard it said before is, don't play in the mud with pigs, because at the end of the day, you're both dirty, but the pig enjoyed it. And so I don't know who said that, but someone told me that one time. But I go back to my main thought that I wrote down before I came on here, which is, please, 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 I beg of everybody, on the left, on the right, in the middle. I mean, let's be very clear here. Charlie was a moderate. He was not an extremist. He was not a far right-wing guy. He was a pretty main line Republican. He was not even, we're talking about a moderate person who was executed here, not even like an extremist. And I go back, please, everybody, do not fall into the temptation and the trap of conditional compassion. Compassion, again, to the statement I wrote down, compassion doesn't ask whether or not they deserve it. It reveals whether or not we're healthy enough to give it. And that has to be our foundation. We have to start with compassion. We're human first. And whether it's the CEO of a healthcare company, whether it is someone on the other side, whether it's this Democratic congresswoman who was executed by a MAGA guy not that long ago, about a month ago, whether it's this gal stabbed on the train, like, compassion has to be no pre-qualifiers, no disclaimers, not condition. It has to be unconditional. And we need to stay steady. We need to use co-regulation. Because just like with kids, you can't expect a child to know how to regulate their nervous system. That's why you're the adult. That's why you're the parent. We have to be the grown-ups here. We have to use co-regulation, use love, use compassion, stay steady. Don't let your anger manifest into outrage. So I don't really have much else to say, I guess.
Put that on a t-shirt. I'm telling you.
Yeah, it's a good one.
An extra large shirt. The spiritual awakening that Tony's talking about is required. It's probably in progress. And nothing we do will stick without it. It also requires action on our part. Jesus didn't tell his followers before he ascended, just pray about it a lot and hang around, and I'll take care of it all later. He said, get up off the rock, get up off the couch, and go do something about it. And that's where we are. And
I
thank you
love
for
that.
asking us to be here today, Ryan. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, guys, for coming. Jake, Tony, Rachel, Katie, Phillip, and Kathleen. Love talking to y'all, and thank you so much for contributing to this conversation.
Nice to meet you all. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts with me.